When you study Black history, you begin to understand a narrative that is filled with pain. Our story is one of survival, but it is also one of tremendous sorrow. What we've experienced and gone through cannot really be fully put into words. The English language is not expansive enough to truly express just how much injustice Black people have faced in this country. That's why I believe it's important that the stories of those who have suffered are told and remembered. This story that I'm going to tell you about today is filled with brutality. It's filled with pain and has no happy parts to it. But this story happened to a real Black family during a time when all we knew was brutality and injustice. I encourage you to watch this video to the end. Don't do it because I'm asking you to do this, but do it so that the memory of this family won't be lost to the halls of injustice. Sim Padgett was born around 1864 in Warren, South Carolina. It's possible that he might have experienced some form of enslavement before emancipation came with the end of the Civil War and the passage of the 13th Amendment in 1865. Sim grew up in the first days of freedom that Black people experienced. He saw the dawn of the Reconstruction era that promised enfranchisement for Black people and promised citizenship and promised a new beginning for newly free Black people. And he also saw the federal government abandon newly free Black people. In 1877, in exchange for winning the presidency, Rutherford B. Hayes agreed to withdraw federal troops from the South and let the Southern states control their affairs and how they dealt with Black people. This ushered in a new era of Jim Crow. Sim saw the rise of the Klan and racial terror. He saw black codes and he saw the introduction of segregation and the introduction of convict leasing, all to re-enslave Black people and keep them in second-class citizenship. But despite all of this, Sim did what he could to survive in a country that was doing everything it could to keep him in bondage. In 1886, Sim married a woman named Sula. Together they had 7 children: Arthur, Sim Jr., Sula, Doja, Ben, Mary, and Dale Padgett. Sim and Sula also had something else that few Black people had back then, and that was land. Despite their station in life, they owned a family farm that they all worked on. This sign of wealth was an affront to the racial order of the day, but still, they continued to build their wealth and raise their family. It's not confirmed, but some believe that this wealth played a role in their ultimate tragic demise. In May of 1910, the Padgetts lived in Tapno County, Georgia, near Reedsville. They worked their land and some of their children worked for white families in the area to earn extra money. Sim Jr., who was around 15 or 16 years old at the time, he worked for Laura Moore. She was the widow of a Georgia legislator. Allegedly, Sim Jr. committed some act or exhibited some behavior that was seen as violating Miss Moore. It's not exactly clear if this is true or if it was made up as a reason to justify what was to come. As with most of these allegations, it spread quickly and the white community wanted revenge. That night, 75 men came to the Padgett's home and they surrounded it. Sim Sr. tried to calm everyone down and he told them that Sim Jr. was not inside the home and that the mob could come inside to search to confirm this. This is where things took a fatal turn. Members of the mob claimed that someone fired at them from inside the Padgett's home as they approached it. They said that it was Sim Jr. who fired at them. Now, several white men were alleged to have been struck and fatally wounded. I would take this entire thing with a grain of salt because it doesn't make much sense for a Black family to fire at a mob of armed white men after they just said they can come inside to search it. But this is what they said to justify what they did after this. Some members of the mob began firing at the home while others went to get reinforcements. Soon, close to 500 white men arrived and began to fire into the Padgett's home for over 30 minutes until they ran out of ammunition. Sim Sr., he lost his life, along with his 10-year-old daughter Mary. His other children were also injured. Sim Jr., he was hit in the lung, and Wilford, he was struck in the hip. And 13-year-old Doja and 6-year-old Dale, they were found holding one another as they lay wounded on the floor. Law enforcement found and arrested Sula and her 11-year-old son Ben, and a family friend named Hamp Strickland. Before taking them to jail, sheriff's deputies took them to Laura Moore's house so that she could identify her attacker. She was unable to make an identification. On their way back to the jail, the deputies claimed that they were overtaken by a mob and they were forced to hand over Sula and Ben. The mob claimed that Sula confessed to firing at one of the white men who ended up losing his life at her home. They then made her turn around and told her to run. They fired at Sula as she ran away, taking her life. They then fired at Ben right there where he stood and took his life as well. The mob was not done yet. They were determined to get every Padgett they could. They searched the area looking for 18-year-old Arthur and 19-year-old Wilford Padgett. Arthur turned himself in the next day and the sheriff hid Arthur in the woods to keep him from being captured by the mob and lynched. Wilford was also eventually taken into custody shortly after that. The mob still wanted both of them though. The sheriff had to take them 70 miles away to the jail in Savannah just to keep them from the mob. The state of Georgia put Arthur on trial for attacking Miss Moore. Arthur denied having anything to do with Miss Moore. And in October 1907, Arthur was found not guilty by an all-white jury of attacking Laura Moore. It's unclear what happened to the remaining Padgetts after this incident. There's a record that suggests that Wilfred Padgett, that he died just a few days after Arthur was found not guilty of attacking Laura Moore. And it's believed that Arthur might have lived after this because there is a World War I draft registration card that bears Arthur's name and his signature. There was another record that we found that shows that Doja Padgett died at age 33 in 1926 from tuberculosis. As for the Padgett's land, it's unlikely that they kept it. There is no record of them owning this land after this, but there is evidence that the state of Georgia and other interested parties took steps to ensure that Sims' property was properly brought before a court to administer his estate. What the Padgetts endured is just one story out of thousands. It's one story of injustice that occurred to black people simply because they were black. And sadly, black people are still suffering that same old misery of injustice happening to us and no one caring to do anything about it. I want to know your thoughts on this story. Had you ever heard of the Padgett family and what happened to them, and how did it make you feel learning all that they went through and how they suffered? Drop me a comment down below and let me know your thoughts.